We want to welcome Dean Sykes to Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and, one of the things we're going to talk about is your book, You Matter. You've written several books, but before we dive into that, can you give the audience a little bit of a background about yourself?
Sure, I've been speaking in high schools predominantly since 1993, January 1st. So we're coming up on January. This upcoming January will be our 34th year anniversary. Spoken with over 2.5 million students, 8 countries, shared a message of hope that just really resonates with young people. Married, 3 adult kids, 2 German shepherds, and a dog we got off the street that just attached itself to my family, and we love getting to do what we do. I do about 180 events a year, all over the world. Do a pretty big presence on social media, and like you said, I've written some books. But that's a quick synopsis of the last 34 years of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can I ask you what got you so focused or into like high schools?
Yeah,
Because
I was
that's a
bullied.
okay.
I
Yeah.
was bullied in high school. At 15 years old, I was sexually abused. 60 seconds changed my life. My drug of choice became lying. I lied more than I ever told the truth because best-selling book of all time says the second greatest commandment says to love your neighbor as yourself. I didn't love me, so I was incapable of loving anybody else. And as I progressed in life, I was going into politics. I thought that was my plan. And I was going to be in the Tennessee legislature at 21, the U.S. Congress at 25, the U.S. Senate at 30, and run for governor at 36. And that was kind of the trajectory that we were on. But one day my life changed in a very dramatic way. And we can get into that if you want to, whenever. But there was a real moment that changed me. And from there, I just saw this open door that I felt like I was supposed to walk through and began doing so. And now I've spoken at over 40, almost 4,400 events now, and just sharing this very simple, basic message. But because I was bullied as a high school kid, because I was sexually abused in high school, because I was emotionally abandoned, in my early years. I mean, so much of my story resonates with teenagers, and it became very obvious that that's where I was supposed to invest my time.
That's amazing. And part of it, I'm curious before we dive into the book itself that you've been doing this for so long. Have you noticed the message is still the same after all these years? Have you
Yeah,
noticed that there's been a change in it, either in how it's delivered or how you try to speak to audiences? But that's a long time, considering all the things that have changed since then.
yeah.
Like, have you noticed anything about,
What's
man,
what's
it's,
ch what's changed is the level of maturity among teenagers. When I started speaking, the very first convention I ever did, there were 600 students there. I asked the question, how many of you have a cell phone? And in 1993, of the 600, three had phones. Simple math tells us 597 did not. Come forward to today, just a couple of days ago, I was in a big assembly. I asked the question, how many of you have a cell phone here? 99% of the hands went up. And so technology has changed teenagers in a very dramatic way. The average teenager will spend between 7 and 9 hours every day on his or her phone. And where else do you see a young person, or anyone for that matter, spending between 49 and 63 hours a week doing anything? And so they live there. And that's so the message that I have is my story, that the story has had some additions to it through the years, but the basic story has remained the same. And students resonate with it because I always just share the truth. And the cool thing about truth is it's always true and people respond to it.
yeah, and your story still resonates with people today. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
this is one that isn't,
It's
you
not
know,
going
oh,
away.
they won't relate to it, or this happened so long ago that this is not even a thing. What you dealt with is still very much what a lot of people experience, and they can resonate with the story.
Yeah.
So, question about the book. You matter. I was thinking about this after I read it, and even thinking about recording with you today and talking about it, like the message you matter. In your experience and what you've seen when you've talked to all the people that you've talked to, when do we start to think that we don't matter? What
Yeah.
are some of those things that we like struggle to think we matter?
Yeah. It's to me, it's the result of of trauma. And so what is trauma but that what happened to us that should have never happened? But on the other side of that coin, trauma is what did not happen that should have happened, right? So I was sexually abused. That was traumatic. That should have never happened, but it did happen. So what didn't happen? I was emotionally abandoned by my mom when I was 4.5 years old. not because she was a bad mom. She just couldn't give what she didn't have. And so for me, I began to understand pretty early on, I was trying to always find a replacement. I was trying to find somebody that would accept me, someone who would tell me and basically that I mattered. And so because I'd been sexually abused and all that I'd come through, the one thing that I share with students on a daily basis is I made a vow the day I was abused, and it was this: I will never tell anybody what happened to me, right? Well, I didn't for 22 years. But 22 years later, walking down aisle 21 at a Home Depot, I turned right and I walked right into the person. And my life unraveled. And one of the things that I share with students and with audiences all over is if you don't deal with your emotions will deal with you. And so what happens is unhealthy teenagers become unhealthy adults. And unhealthy attracts unhealthy, like healthy attracts healthy. And when two become one flesh, what do? They reproduce what they are. So the cool thing about the story, there's a lot of redemption in my story, I believe, and that is what you overcome in your life. This is for anybody. What you overcome can become your platform, right? I made that vow at 15 years old. I'll never tell anybody. Today, there's not a day of the year, every single day of the year, someone either through our television broadcast, on our social media broadcast, through a book I've written, or through a podcast, or through an assembly, someone every day of the year hears me say, I was sexually abused at 15. I made a vow I'll never talk about it. I ran into the person. I chose to forgive. I got free. It became my platform.
Yeah. That's a it's amazing to think about and to take into all that in because it seems like a simple you matter and why is that such a hard message to even carry or talk about? But then you mention where what that does and everything about it. I want to talk about one of the things I highlighted in the book. This was on page 45. I really resonated with this was let's return to the mirror. When you look in the mirror, a real mirror, do you like who's staring back at you? Do you even recognize that person? Is it the genuine, authentic version of yourself? Here's why I really like this, and I really want to talk to you about this. Is it reminds me of Chris Herron, the
Mm-hmm.
former basketball player, and he does a lot of work in the substance recovery treatment, speaker, all that. In his documentary, he talks so much about how he was shaving in the shower for so long, and then it took him like 2 years before he actually like, looked himself in the mirror. And I resonate with that because we think we see ourselves all the time. Like
That's
we
right.
we brush our teeth or we do something, but how often can we say we really like sit and really look at ourselves and or I even say smile to yourself.
Yeah.
We think we do that because there's a mirror in every bathroom, but yet we don't really do that. And I thought a lot about that when you were talking about like look in the mirror and really spend time to sit there with that. Why don't we do that? Why is that hard to really just
Yeah.
sit kind of look in the mirror, even though it's right there? We think we're doing it, but you could brush your teeth and really not look in the
Yeah.
mirror. You could wash your face and you're kind of looking maybe in the corner of the mirror somewhere else, but really just, all right, let me just look and smile to myself or see myself.
That's such a thoughtful question to ask because I believe at the end of the day, my wife, it was her example. She says, if your hand is a mirror, and her version was, do you see what God sees when you look in the mirror? Most people don't. And to your question, when you look in the mirror, if you're not comfortable in your own skin, you may not like what you see. And therefore, you don't necessarily I didn't, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who was broken, someone who was full of shame, someone who felt guilty, and yet I had done nothing wrong. But that's what happens in those kind of moments. And so until we're able, one of the things my mom taught me was a 6 word phrase that has stuck with me all these years: to thine own self be true. In other words, if we can't be true to ourselves, then we're not going to be able to be true with anyone really. And so when you take the time, and sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to take a look in that mirror because you know you better than anybody knows you. You know all of your secrets. You know all of the failures, supposedly. You know all of the successes. You know what you're thinking about. You know where your thought life is, where it was, where you're planning, you know everything about you. And in reality, you're probably the only person who knows everything about you this side of eternity. So sometimes I think people get very, not necessarily frustrated, but maybe saddened, maybe oppressed, depressed. Maybe they feel like they don't matter. Maybe they feel like if I wasn't here, nobody would miss me. Or they don't see the beauty of who they are. There's something that makes you uniquely you. And if you, parenthetically, you were not here, we would all be missing someone so very special because you were created on purpose and with purpose and for purpose. And so when you can take a moment and look in that mirror and smile at who's looking back at you, then you know you've begun to kind of dig deeper into the unpacking process of this journey we know as life.
Yeah, I always wonder what it would be like if people practice that more often or put that into the work of like just look at yourself in the mirror, smile to
Hmm.
yourself, like what impact that would have because I think we see ourselves a lot more than we really
No, I totally
do.
agree.
And
Totally agree with
sometimes we are not looking at ourselves, not even realizing we're not even really doing it. So that really stood out in the book. I really appreciated that.
you. Thanks.
One thing I wanted to ask you, and I thought this was really great, where you said teenagers and adults don't necessarily want to always talk because we always look at like teenagers don't want to talk, and sometimes as a counselor, I have plenty of teenagers who talk. I have some who
Right.
don't, but
Sure.
really, like I have that the same with some adults too. Some
Hmm.
adults don't always want to talk, and sometimes I have adults that want to talk a lot. So you don't separate the two. You kind of look at like sometimes teenagers and adults both don't want to talk. People do, however, desperately need to be heard. Why is it so hard to sometimes just listen? From both sides. Silence can be uncomfortable. As a counselor, I've learned how to sit in silence and
Hmm.
not get squirmy or not try to fill the void. Early on,
Yep.
I did that, right? Because that
Sure.
was hard. But we know sometimes someone just wants to be heard. And it doesn't take a lot of words to do that. It doesn't take a lot to make that happen. Like you don't have to solve anything or go figure
Right.
out. But why is it challenging for us to be able to just listen to each other and have someone really feel like they've been heard?
Yeah, I share in assemblies. I said, a lot of teenagers don't necessarily want to talk to their parents, but they do desperately need to be seen and heard by them. Because if you don't feel like you're seen or you don't feel like you're heard, you will go down this trail that leads you to the wrong belief that, well, my life doesn't matter, nobody cares. And one of the greatest things that I, as a speaker, that I do, and I, two eyes, two ears, one mouth, translation, I listen and watch twice as much as I talk. I've learned to just sit there because after every assembly, students come up and they want to talk. They want to tell their story, right? I do a lot of churches on the weekends. When I get through, here come all these adults. They want, again, to be heard because what they didn't get as a teenager, they're not getting as an adult, and they're carrying this with them, and then they're replicating this, and they don't know how. Like I have so many parents say to me, I don't know what to say to my teenager. I don't know how to begin a conversation. And my answer is always the same with, well, start by turning your phones off. Right? I knew that our family needed to make some changes years ago when our then teenage son was upstairs in his room and I was downstairs in our family room and he and I were texting each other. I knew then we got to turn the phones off. And so Lori, my wife, said, you know what, let's do this. And so every night we would come together as a family around our dinner table and we would have dinner together and we would play the high-low game. What was your high today? What was your low today? What made it your high? What made it your low? What did that do? But it taught our kids and even us the art of communication, engaging in and being genuinely thoughtful and listening and wanting to know. And so when a young person or an adult for that matter doesn't feel like they're getting that, or if they don't feel comfortable sitting with someone, I love what you said about in that silence. Silence to me can be deafening. You can just be, ooh, but to be able to sit there, because there's been many times I'm one of the guys they call when there's tragedies, school shootings. So I've stood where students have been shot and killed. And a lot of times you stand in those moments and someone's asked you a question and I don't know the answer to it. And I've learned to say, I don't know. I don't understand it either. But maybe we can figure this out together instead of giving them some answer that just kind of a fluff answer that doesn't really do anything except maybe bring confusion. And so I think as people, we have the opportunity to just engage in one another's lives and be available, be someone who can just listen. I, I have, my wife and I are having a conversation that it's been probably 6 or 8 months ago. She said, I'm not asking you to give me the answer. I'm asking you to listen. And I went, okay, I got it. And I didn't try to solve it. I just realized she just wants to talk. She just wants to be heard. She's not asking me to fix it. She knows how to fix this. And I see that a lot with adults who are trying to fix their teenagers' lives, but yet they don't really have a relationship with them because they don't spend any time together.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear. There's two things that come out of that I want to talk about. One of them is I remember I was in supervision with a counselor who talked about they were seeing this one person. They saw them for like 6 or 7 sessions. They they decided that they felt they were in a spot that was I was good. I don't need to come to counseling anymore. And they got a letter like a year later saying how thankful they were for the counseling that they got. And the counselor kind of really downplayed it. And the reason being was the counselor was like, I didn't do anything. Like I barely said a word. The person talked so much and I just
Hmm.
listened and really kind of downplayed what they did because they're like they weren't really talking about all these therapeutic
Right.
techniques or these huge interventions. Like mostly what I did was I listened and I tried to tell the person that like don't downplay how valuable just being a safe space to
Mm.
be heard because this person may have never had anybody like that in their life. They may have not had that in any relationship. So you being able to provide that and this person be able to speak and talk. Sometimes when people hear themselves, it's a lot different than
Yep.
what's going on in their head. It's one of the things that I
Yep.
like most about when you're talking or sharing your thoughts out loud is like, well, when I hear that, that's a lot different than when I
Yep.
think it.
Yep.
So I always say like we can't downplay the impact of listening and active listening. The other thing I want to talk about was you mentioned this kind of goes back to the you matter part. It does sometimes feel like what matters gets kind of our attention gets pulled apart into a lot of different things.
Mm.
So when someone's trying to talk or share and they just want to be heard, but someone else is paying attention to the TV or they're paying attention to something else, that does create this now moment of like, well, do I matter when something else is getting uh, attention or getting just, and I always like to say attention because I think getting attention kind of gets this negative vibe, like attention
Right.
seeking. But just to know that I'm gonna choose, you know what, I'm gonna put my phone away and
Yep.
you are what matters
Right.
right
You're the
now most.
priority. Yep.
Yeah. So how do you look at that with, and I don't know if it's any different today. Maybe it's just because of the ways in which we do it, but there are always competing things trying to
Oh yeah.
get in the and not get in the way. I'm not saying it the best, but
But I
there's a
understand.
lot that can go to what's a priority and what matters, even though we're trying to say what matters most is, the relationships and the people that we have in our lives.
Right. It comes down to what we are intentional about. Intentionality is a big thing, I believe. And so when I'm speaking at an assembly, for example, and students they come up and they want to talk, and I know I've got two more schools to get to, right? And I've got this much time, but logistically to exit this school, get in the vehicle, get to the next school. I mean, it's there's, and there've been many times where I've just hit the brakes and gone, you know what? I'm scheduled to be there. I'm going to be a few minutes late probably, but I need you to know how valuable you are, how important you are, and I want to just I can't spend 30 minutes with you, but I can sure spend 5 or 6. So I'm all ears. What do you want to say? And just that moment where they know that in those 5 or 6 minutes, even though there's 800, 1,000, 2,000 kids waiting, they are the priority. They are the most important aspect going on right then. And what does that do? But it gives them this intangible, what I call this intangible asset of hope. Like, wait a minute. Okay. And you know this, you're the safest person somebody's ever going to talk to if you're speaking on stage and then you're leaving. You don't live there. So I'll have kids stand in line for 30, 45 minutes to tell me their stories, which tells me there's a whole generation out there desperately wanting someone to hear them. And so that's why I taught when speaking with parents, make your kids make your kids your priority. I mean, you can't maybe not 24/7, but I love what you said, put the phone away. Just put it aside for a little bit. Focus on, turn your television off, get off social media. Just sit and have that moment. Go for a walk with them. I mean, find out what it is that turns your kids on. whether it's riding a horse or kicking a soccer ball or playing golf or whatever. And whether you do any of that or not is irrelevant. Just go be part of the process with them. Keep showing up because that's what how they measure. Teenagers today, I mean, listen, I know I've done this a long time. Teenagers spell love Time. I have so many students say to me, it doesn't matter what my parents give me. I appreciate the car, I appreciate the whatever. I just want their time. And most parents go, that's not my kid. And I'm like, yeah, you don't think it is, but it is. Well, you don't know how they treat me. They're just responding to what they're feeling on the inside because they're not getting it from you. This isn't rocket science. This is pretty simple.
Yeah, I think that's where we get into like how do we show people you matter? And there's I don't think there's this like secret magical answer. It's like a lot of the little things that we forget how impactful they are.
You're right.
It's not like this big, you know, discovery we've made about what it
No,
is. It's like these little things, day-to-day things, in the moment things that don't take a lot of resources, doesn't take all the money in the world to be able to do
no.
it or all the solutions. But it's like the little things that just have become so easily overlooked
I,
in
I
trying to
have an
do it.
I have an 18-month-old granddaughter, and when I go over to see her, she squeals, throws her arms up, and runs to me, and I just embrace her. And not because I've brought her something, not because I've given her a gift. She just loves the fact that she knows I'm going to get on the ground. We're going to wrestle. I'm going to listen to her say things I don't even understand. But you know what? She loves ice cream. And I got enough sense to know, okay, ice cream. That's our key here today. And we'll take her to get an ice cream. And that kid's heart is so full. What am I doing? It's a very simple analogy. I'm meeting her where she is. I'm not trying to do something that's going to be, appreciated in 10 years. I'm building small memories every day. I'll FaceTime her if I'm on the road or something, or I'm in my office. I'll check in with her. And I think parents sometimes try to overcomplicate parenting. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of responsibility in parenting, but at the same time, if we can meet our kids where they are and just invest in them without any hidden agenda, without trying to convince them of anything, just you know what? I remember that our son came to me one day about 4 or 5 years ago and he said, I'm going to become a lawyer. I said, what? I thought you were going to come to work here. And you're working here. You're with me. You're going to travel, do the world. No, Dad, I'm going to become an attorney. And it shook me because I was like, well, that wasn't my plan for my son. But a few weeks ago, when I went down to his office for the first time as an attorney who passed the bar and he's working as an attorney now, I walked in and I said, man, I am so proud of you because you were true to yourself, you were true to what was in your heart. And my lack of support that first year didn't slow you down. And I need you to know I apologize. I wasn't as supportive. Now I got very supportive the last 3 years when you were in law school. So but that first year, I was making it about me, and that was wrong. I needed to make it about you because this is your life and just the ability to see how he's flourishing. And it's because he chased his passion and he had support around him. And I think if parents can do that, if we can say to our kids, your life really does matter. You're not a mistake. You're here with a tremendous purpose. And what can we do to help advance that purpose? What can we do to help you become the best version of you that you can become? Well, to do that, you've got to be healthy yourself. And sadly, I see a lot of parents who are trying to replicate their life through the life of their child.
And
They're trying.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I think you in the book you wrote meet them where they are. I hear that a lot in counseling. It's one
Hmm.
of the key components with the several different therapies modalities. So from a counselor perspective, that's like all the time, right? That's
Right.
one of the big things. I haven't really heard that in relation to parents meeting kids where they are. So I really appreciate that perspective of it because I don't think we talk about that enough.
Well, it's kids are deep down, they want I don't care how old you are. My dad will be 88 this December, right? The other day, he and I went over and I was hitting some golf balls. I recently had fractured my shoulder and it was one of the first times to get back and my dad was watching. And I'll be 60 years old in January. So at 60 years old, I'm hitting a golf ball, and my dad's standing behind me watching, and still inside of me, I'm wanting him to go. I'm wanting him to go. That's a great shot, Dean. Boy, that's a good shot. What am I looking for? That parental affirmation. It still means something to me at 60 years old. Well, maybe that's healthy, maybe that's unhealthy. I don't know, but I recognized it. I recognized I hit that shot. I did exactly what I wanted to do. It came right to left, hit right where I wanted to hit. I'm pleased with it. I couldn't have done it any better. That wasn't enough for me. I wanted to hear my dad say, "Boy, that's a good shot, D. You have that, even though you broke your shoulder, you haven't lost your swing." And that's what he said. I was like, "All right, mission accomplished. I can go. I can go now." And I think a lot of us are still searching for that validation.
Yeah. And that awareness, just being aware
Yeah.
of that, like that's key. I think that's even I like the honesty you have with is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? But at least I'm aware of it. I
Hmm.
know that that's what I was looking for, searching for, wanting. And this ties into another great part with your book is part of the thing that I underlined here was why is it important to differentiate between discovering and deciding your purpose? I really like that because in a lot of the work that I do, I find some people are thinking they're going to discover something or find an answer that will sort of explain it all, or at least be something to tell them, okay, now I know this and now I know what I can do. But I often find that that becomes like this sort of constant search that they're trying to discover something. But then even when I talk about like, okay, well, what if it's this? What changes now? What does that do for you? And that brought me to this idea of when you look at the difference between discovering and deciding your purpose. So can you share a little bit more about why
Yeah.
that's important to differentiate?
Yeah. From me, my perspective is very simple. Our purpose is not ours to decide. It's ours to discover because I believe it was decided from the foundation of time. So deciding like, that this is my purpose relies on ourself to make a decision, which becomes something that can be very self-serving. It can become something very pride-driven. It can become something that we make it all about ourselves. But when we discover why we're here, what our purpose is, what is our reason for getting out of bed in the morning, and we understand that we did not make that decision. Went on a journey of discovering that. What happens? It opens up a whole other perspective because now, what I wanted to do, if I had decided my life, I would be in politics. I'd probably be a very dangerous person in politics. I think I would be. But from the standpoint of discovery, the discovery not only tells you what, that journey of discovering tells you why. What I do doesn't get me out of bed most mornings. Why I do it gets me out of bed crazy hours of the morning, early morning, because the why isn't about me. What I do isn't about me. You don't see banners when I speak. You very even very. You may know my name is Dean, maybe, but at the end of the day, I could care less. I'm interested in a young person, or for that matter, anyone knowing that they matter because I've discovered that's my purpose. For the rest of my life, my only job as a speaker is to say you were created on purpose, with purpose, and for purpose, and because you're breathing, you matter. And I take that message and I extrapolate it out over about 25 or 30 minutes, and we go do it in multiple cities every day, and that's what we do. And there's so much in that when you discover your purpose, there's so much validation, there's so much contentment because you realize, oh, this is why I'm here. But if you try to decide it and then you want to live your life based on your rules, your regulations, your whatever, then you're living in a performance-based mentality that you have to perform to make it happen. I don't perform. There's no pressure. I have zero pressure doing what I do. I haven't had a job since I was 26 years old. I get to do this.
I think that reminds me of I'm thinking of like a movie where there's this treasure hunt or this valued possession that someone's going after, a team's going after, and part of it is once they get to that, the discovery, while it's exciting when it happens, all of a sudden it can almost deflate pretty fast.
Mm.
It's kind of like now what? It was sort of
Right.
like now look at all that we went through and got to this point. Now it's like, well, I guess that's it now. That's over. I think like that's where part of the discovery is not enough to get you need to figure out that like what's that purpose then, or what is the
Right.
purpose that we just went through and to continue to go through, because I think that ties into if I find a purpose, then there is some sense that I matter,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's some
Yep.
connection between finding that purpose or feeling like I have a purpose, that means I matter in to someone else or to some other
Yep.
people, but there is some connection with that, right?
Well, the connection is validation. When you discover what your purpose is, you'll discover that you have value, not because you do that, but because it's who you are. When it's, for me, I'm a speaker, but my value does not become from me being a speaker. My value becomes from I'm breathing, and I had nothing to do with that. Because I'm breathing, I have this purpose. My purpose is to do what I do every day. But the reason that my life matters is, yeah, I've been given this purpose. Yes, there's value to it. But at the end of the day, it's I'm breathing. And again, that's if we get that revelation across that, well, you didn't have anything to do with this. You're just here because at the end of the day, you are able to realize when you look in the mirror, I, I matter. I'm alive. My life matters. And a lot of people have a real issue trying to figure that one out and trying to accept that because they feel like they have to do to be. We weren't created to be human doers. We were created to be human beings. Just be. Just accept that, you know, life has issues, life has challenges. I have glorious days and I have days that I'm like, oh, I'm glad that day's over. We all have those moments. But at the end of this journey known as life, we're going to be able to look back over our shoulder, hopefully, and go, we helped some people along the way.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm glad that when I read that and talked about it, that it was really insightful, that difference. I think a lot of people try and think about discovering something that now gives an answer versus the idea of discovering a purpose and not just discovering an answer or discovering something that's gonna sort of, all right, I guess that wraps it all up. Like when there's
Right.
a purpose, there kind of really is no wraps. Like
No,
that's just what continues to
that's right.
drive you forward still.
You get it.
Now, the book I wanted to ask about this because you've written a lot of books.
Hmm.
The You probably could have made this twice as long, four times as long. Like you,
Yep.
it probably could have been a much bigger book. It's a pretty quick read. It's a pretty fast one. Can you talk? Was there any intent behind that?
Oh,
Any
100%.
purpose why
Yep.
it wasn't one that needed to be a couple hundred pages? But the size is fantastic. It's I think I read it on a airplane when I was flying somewhere that I could get it done right there. And
Yep.
so can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was 100% intentionality. I mean, that was done on purpose. It's 104 pages long. You can read it hour and a half if you're a slower reader. And it's because the primary audience is teenagers. And I know that audience pretty well. They're not going to spend 3 or 4 hours reading something. And there's not that book, the book is not comprised of lots of facts and it's conversation. If you happen to enjoy how I speak, you'll enjoy how I write. It's just from the heart. I didn't sit down and lay out the book. I just started writing, and it came very quickly. And I know that if a young person can get this book in their heart, the truth contained in it can set some people free because that's what truth is designed to do. And so I share more of my story in the book. I share more of the message of you matter. But then I really, for the majority of the book, I unpack why you matter. I talk about that and I bring some examples into focus there. And so again, you're right on. It was very short to the point and purposefully so because if I get an hour with a teenager and they're going to give me an hour of their life, then I would love for them to be able to get that book and go, okay, this is it's worth the read. It's we're getting pretty significant response back. It's already been used to help quite a few people. We're very grateful for that.
And I like it's also just constantly tied back into this discussion we've had about what it takes to show you matter is that even a book that's this small, it's meant to be like a conversation, almost talking to you, that even something like that can have as strong a message and a
Hmm.
method to deliver that you read this, it's going to take an hour, and by the end, you're going to feel that or see that versus I don't need you to read, a 400-page book that's going to take you, a couple weekends to finally realize what I get out of it.
Yeah.
It really ties along in everything that we've been sort of going through with this, that you can matter in even this short read that's a dialogue conversation that can be read pretty fast.
Well, it's kind of like I would be inviting you to a coffee shop
Yeah.
and let's just sit down and let's have a conversation about this topic called You Matter. And it's just imagine one on one, just having this dialogue, very general, very easy. And every so often you get hit with a nugget of truth that go, oh, wow, okay, I get that. I see that. Yep, it resonates, makes sense. That's what this book does. It invites you into an hour-long conversation.
How would you rank this? And rank is I'm not asking for like a number or whatnot, but
Yeah.
where would you see this book has its place among all the other books that you've written and
Yeah,
stuff
there's
like
no,
that?
there's
Like,
there's no question. This is the 33rd book I've written, and without question, if I had never written the other 32, this is the one. This is the legacy book of our outreach. If I had died yesterday, this book would carry on the message. It is no hesitation of contradiction, the most important book I've ever written.
so how do you look at that from where you've started with all the books you've written in
Yeah,
between, then how it gets to this one is that one? Like,
yeah.
what's that like for you, I guess, to
Oh,
to
it's a
have that?
journey.
Yeah.
It's every book I've written has had a mission behind it. But if asked the question, if you could only write one book in your life, which of the 33 would you write? Oh, I don't, that's not even a decision. It's a foregone conclusion. It's the You Matter book because You Matter, when I started it, it started out as a message, which became a mission, which now became a movement. And so the book ties it all together. A book will go where I may not get to go where that book will go. It could go to South Africa. It could go, who knows? The students, the parents who get it, wherever they get it, I may never get to their school, but the message is getting there.
So I guess one last question I have before we kind of wrap up would be,
Sure.
where does it go from here? And you kind of talked about it a little bit, but when you look at this book and it getting out there, like where do you look at this going from here with how
Yeah. It's
important this book itself is based on what we just said?
no, it has become the mission of our outreach, of our ministry, because it's what I will our plans right now internally, this is what I'll do for the remainder of my life. I may never write another book, but again, who knows? I might. But usually this time of the year, I know to start writing what's the next year book. And I have zero direction in my heart for a new book right now, which tells me this is where we're supposed to focus. So we'll continue going out, traveling, speaking in high schools, teen challenge centers, churches, and prisons. We'll take the book with us wherever we go. We've in the last 27 months, we've had 169 million views of our videos on social media. We'll promote it there. It's a constant pursuit of getting this message into the hands of people who need to know that they matter.
That's amazing. That's great. And even by me not wanting for you to rank it, you sort of
Yeah,
acknowledged how important it is. So I really appreciate you sharing that with the audience and stuff. All right, so after our conversation, everything that we talked about, where this is, any final takeaways, anything you want audience members to know? We'll have books to where they can learn more, links to where they can find out more about you, where they can
sure,
get the
sure.
book and all that. But any final talking points for
Yeah,
listeners?
I would say this, no matter what you're experiencing, no matter what you've done in your life, no matter where you've been, no matter where you are, we all have mountaintop experiences. We all have valleys where we are just lower than low, and we've all been there. And I believe that the testimony of your life begins at the root word of that testimony, and that is test. We all have tests we have to go through. And maybe you're going through a test right now. Maybe your life isn't what you wanted it to be or thought it would be or turned out the way you wanted to. Or maybe you're living at the mountaintop pinnacle of life. Wherever you find yourself on this continuum, this journey we know is life, my simple but perhaps profound statement to you is how I close every assembly. God created you on purpose, with purpose, and for purpose. And because you're breathing, my friend, you matter.
Thanks, Dean. I really
Yeah.
appreciate everything that we talked about. I think during this conversation, I felt that. you felt that, and audience members will hear it as well. So appreciate
Well,
everything. The book You Matter is a simple message. Sometimes it's hard to deliver and it's hard to hear, but I think you've done it in a way that gets people to see that more hopeful about it. So I want to thank you for everything and being a guest on the podcast.
well, thanks so much, man. I really enjoyed our time together.